All right, we come back to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts now for teaming. And we have here Harry Spence and Kim Wadsworth. Thank you both for joining us.
Trying to figure out how to move this so that I avoid the trap door.
You've been here before. You know the kind of stuff.
I'm here with Kim Wadsworth. Kim is a supervisor of a teaming unit in Lynn, Massachusetts. I'm going to describe the teaming initiative in the child welfare system in Massachusetts, and then Kim and I are going to be available for the questions. This story really begins about 4.5 years ago. I joined the department as commissioner at that time. And not long after, we began to ask the question about the impact of secondary trauma on frontline workers in child welfare. Child welfare workers are immersed all the time in trauma. They encounter it in the families that they are involved in, where abuse and neglect obviously has a traumatic effect on children. Parents are often have histories of trauma in their lives. And then child welfare workers become enmeshed in that in activities like removals, where they themselves are actors in the trauma that occurs. So the question of this impact on their work was critical. At the same time, we were beginning to ask the question about the imponderable decisions that child welfare workers face. I was stunned to find myself faced with a decision as to whether a 4-month-old child should be placed with which of two families, each of whom had a claim on this child. One, a large, extended, working-class Irish Catholic family in South Boston. One, a single-parent, upper-middle-class professional, single mother. Which of these two families was the right family? And it's led me to the conclusion that it's not coincidental that the story of the Wisdom of Solomon is about what it's about. It's about child welfare issues. So this question of imponderable decisions where there is no clear rubric that gives you the right answer. How do you decide which of these two lives this 4-month-old should have forever? And then finally, we were concerned about the issues of data gathering. Child welfare decisions are primarily based on the observations of a single social worker, observing a family, and interpreting extraordinarily complex interactions in that family, and interpreting the level of risk, understanding it in a cultural context or not, understanding this behavior and its meaning. Each of these things led us to a deep concern about the model that Massachusetts used of a single, isolated, autonomous social worker with 18 cases reporting to a supervisor. And that led us to say, let's go look around the nation and find the states that are doing teams. Because if child welfare work is trauma work, the standard rule around all trauma work is it must be done in teams. And we discovered there were none. And at that point, we approached the Marguerite Casey Foundation and received support to begin experiments in teaming. We did this in a highly decentralized manner. We put out a kind of internal RFR within the department in the midst, actually, of huge, tremendous financial cutbacks. We said 2 conditions. There shall be the same economy of resources in teaming, that is, workers working together on cases, so we aren't adding staff. We don't have the dollars to do that. And secondly, we were going to use a mechanism of divergence and then convergence, multiply the different models and learn from those different models and converge on an answer. We have found in the last 2 years extraordinary consequences and results from this shift to teams. In the teaming units, cases are assigned to a 5-member team. That 5-member team works with a single supervisor like Kim. And it's had a whole array of impacts. One, we've learned from surveys and interviews and focus groups with the workers themselves, the immediate impact was a huge reduction in emotional stress in the work because these imponderable decisions were shared. They could talk about their own personal trauma that they experienced in the work and share that. Secondly, the quality of decision-making showed a great deal of improvement because decision-making had the benefit of collective involvement. Idiosyncratic practice greatly diminished. Huge problem in child welfare. The standards are not clear. They're not black line standards for removal. Far from it. There's a great deal of discretion. So there's the danger all the time of idiosyncratic practice. Group decision-making greatly diminishes that. Cultural competence was increased because there could be you could have diverse teams where someone more knowledgeable about a particular culture could bring strength to that. And we also know that this work is lumpy, child welfare work. At the beginning of cases, there's often a family crisis. There's a need for very rapid intervention with a great deal of intensity. When you have a single worker, it's impossible to mobilize the resources to make that happen. And so services get dribbled in with huge loss of impact. By teaming, the group constantly meets regularly to reorganize their work and figure out how that work shall be done in the coming week, and then they move resources within the team around to meet the needs.
Good. Thank you very much. Questions? Lee Shore.
You say, Commissioner Spence, that that teaming is a response to trauma work in other areas, and teaming is certainly has been a way of improving the quality of practice in many other sectors, but it's innovative in child welfare.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that and about the difficulty in changing the culture of child welfare in order to place teaming in a central place?
Well, in some ways, what is startling about this is that it's an innovation. In some ways, it is part of the pain of the work of child welfare that this should be, at this late date, an innovation that's needed. I'll be blunt, that's the case. But it is an innovation, I think, because child welfare finds itself for the last 20 years constantly in a defensive crouch. And in that defensive crouch has a very, very difficult time learning and developing as an enterprise. As a result, I would argue, as someone new to child welfare, this is a painfully underdeveloped industry or enterprise. And so teaming becomes a major innovation. I assumed when we said, let's go look at other states, we'd find lots of different models. Everyone uses the same single worker. There are beginning to be slight variations, but very slight. So we're delighted that New York State, for example, has now decided, as a result of spending time with us and having our people go to them, that they will have 3 jurisdictions, New York City, Westchester County, and Schenectady, start teaming initiatives like ours, and we're going to hopefully form a joint learning community. By and large, I would say in child welfare, one of the huge struggles is, as clinical learning has advanced, organizational learning has not. The result is that the adoption of the clinical learning is very slow or not at all, because the organizational changes that are necessary don't occur. This is a change in the fundamental core work process of child welfare. There's been no change in that in 25 years of history prior to this.
Maria, David, and then Ellen.
One of the things that came out in the report is the challenge to the traditional supervisor, caseworker role, and the degree to which teaming challenges the role of the supervisor when you've got more people actually making decisions. Could you speak a little about that?
I think, quite frankly, at the very beginning, I worried about if we're making decisions. I was very comfortable with my traditional role. I make the decision with the worker. What if something happens? Who will be the fall guy? Even though Commissioner Spence would say, you know, as long as you're working in the best way you can, I really worried about, was my name going to be the name in the paper? So it was really, as a supervisor, as I saw my workers begin to challenge each other and my workers really start to develop decisions on their own, that I was able to give up, I think, my own control of my work. I think a lot of us as supervisors had that same struggle. We meet regularly as team leaders and have talked a lot about that. It's been refreshing to see my own social workers come up with ideas that even 6 months ago they would not have been able to do without.
David?
You know.
I just want to add one quick note to that, because I think one of the things that happens in child welfare is that the fairly hierarchical supervisor-social worker relationship is then recapitulated in the relationship between the social worker and the family. So the shift to teaming actually has had a dramatic and quite stunning and totally, to us, unexpected impact on relationships with families, where in fact the advance to family-centered practice, which we thought would just be sort of endlessly training and retraining to move people from an adversarial to a family-centered practice, with teaming, all of a sudden the whole dynamic shifts because of the collaborative model in the work that then becomes a collaborative model with the family. And the result is that there is a huge pull among teaming workers for much deeper training and support and understanding of family-centered practice, because it is the automatic way they move to work as you change the fundamental core work process.
This as I understand it, is still a pilot project within your organization. And that makes it very unusual for us. Usually innovations that we see at this level are adopted by the organization formally. On top of that, the union hasn't weighed in, and we're going to have, we are 100% certain of having a different governor next January. Given all that, can you assure us that this will be rolled out organization-wide and survive?
I think the answer is that twofold. I think it would be a mistake for me ever to predict my tenure after the next election, or for any appointed official to predict their tenure, especially in child welfare. But I do think we have a great deal of confidence in Massachusetts. More important from our point of view, frankly, the New York State adoption was really important to us for exactly that reason. Child welfare is always a tenuous world. That's part of the reason why it's so underdeveloped. So the fact that we now have a major and powerful partner deeply committed to this same experiment makes us believe that this will move forward, because Larry Brown, the New York commissioner, and the county commissioners of a number of the counties are absolutely committed to the belief that there is immensely important learning here and that they're going to join. So I think between us and as it spreads, there's no question, and I frankly, personally, am very confident about Massachusetts. I just don't want to exercise bravado around that.
If there were someone, let's ask a final question. If there were someone here who wanted to say, why don't we give this 2 years and let's see what the real results are in terms of the child welfare population itself, would we know a lot more than 2 years than we know today?
Well, the difficulty, this was part of our difficulty. The difficulty is that child welfare outcomes are very slow to come. They're multi-year outcomes. Mm-hmm. The issues of outcomes in child welfare usually take 5 to 7 years at least. We believe, and New York now believes, and others in the field, frankly, we were asked by the American Public Human Services Association to do a story for them. A number of people believe this is a critical innovation. To wait 7 years would be a serious disservice, to wait 7 years for recognition and dissemination of it in the field. So we believe that the evidence is powerful enough today that it should be shared immediately with others.
This is the evidence based largely on the dynamics among the child welfare workers themselves.
And family response. We've also done surveys of family responses, and family responses are extraordinarily positive. They love it.
Final question. Is there someone who's in charge of a team? Is there a team leader who takes, is that you? Kim, do you do that kind of thing?
I'm a team leader. I'm a supervisor, so I'm the leader of my unit. And then also as part of the project, we have a project manager who is a former regional director